fire now. I've been counting on my angel choir to put some wings upon my feet.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from a very cold day here in New Mexico. We're delighted you've chosen to join us today. My name, of course, is Sandy Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Fe Council on International Relations. Today we have a couple of talks for your viewing and listening pleasure. First up, we'll of course be talking all about how coronavirus has reshaped African journalism, looking at taking stops at various different points in the continent. Today at 1 o'clock, we'll look at Indian country here in New Mexico, specifically looking at Navajo Nation and then some of the Pueblos and tribal communities here in the state to understand how they have dealt with and addressed and how life has changed in tribal communities due to coronavirus. And then at 2 o'clock today, you may have noticed we have a special little briefing from Ambassador Vicki Huddleston and Ambassador Marcus Guino, who've been part of the thinking behind President-elect Biden's foreign policy team. That's at 2 o'clock. I'll paste the Zoom link for you into the chat window if you'd like to join us then. It's going to be a great overview of all the different appointments from the ambassador to the United Nations to Secretary of State, of course. And they have lots of sort of inside information and scoop for you. So that's at 2 o'clock, right after our talk on covering crisis in Indian country. Today, of course, we are not just going to Africa, but we're also going into and going to be talking about the State Department's International Visitor Leadership Program. Many of you out there are familiar with it or have participated in part of this program. It's an 80-year-old program, a true bipartisan supported program that does many things, but really the signature of it all is bringing young global leaders from truly every corner of the world to the United States to interact with their professional peers. They visit 5 cities on that tour. They get to learn all kinds of different things about their profession from their American counterparts. And of course, we get to learn all kinds of things from them. They bring such an incredible light to our lives and to our working experiences. We miss you all tremendously, and we're so looking forward to this program coming back in earnest when all of this craziness around coronavirus comes to a pause. And of course, this conference, Journalism Under Fire, has featured visitors from every corner of the globe. In the first year in 2018, we had visitors from, I think, something like 40 different countries. Last year, we had 26 African journalists. And you may have noticed I've been asking speakers in many ways what stands out for them from their previous experiences at Journalism Under Fire. And almost to a T, all of them talk about the truly global dimension of this conference and how fortunate they are to go and have a coffee with a journalist from India or a journalist from Indonesia or a journalist from South Africa. And kind of that serendipity of you never know who you're going to meet at a conference, and truly having folks from the International Visitor Leadership Program through the Edward R. Murrow program, which is a connected aspect that brings journalists to the United States. We are all so much richer for that. And so I want to start today's program by welcoming Sana Abed-Kotob, who is with the State Department. And Sana, just before I say hello, I'm just going to really quickly run through your bio. She's, of course, the Deputy Director for the Office of International Visitors at the U.S. Department of State. She joined the Office of International Visitors in 1999 and has served as Deputy Director since 2019. Prior to joining State, she served as Associate Editor of the Middle East Journal and taught at the University of Maryland. And of course, Sana came to our very first Journalism Under Fire and spoke. So welcome, Sana. It's great to see you.
Hi, Sandy. Thank you so much for inviting me. Really happy to be here.
So I have to ask the question, what jumps out at you from your time here in Santa Fe? What was one of the things that you really sort of fondly recall?
It was my first visit to Santa Fe. What struck me first wasn't even the conference. It was just the airport that I landed in. It was so different than the airports that I'm used to at Dulles and at National Airport and here and there. But it was charming and beautiful, great experience. But what struck me at your conference in 2018 was how you engaged students. You had all sorts of students there who were there in person. And I recall, and I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, but I recall a young lady who was a student standing at the podium and speaking with such eloquence and such passion about the craft of journalism. It just impressed me so much and gave me hope for the future of journalism. There are so many bright young people out there, and somehow you managed in your conference to tap into them. So great job.
Oh, we have some spectacular students, and we've been trying to feature as many as we can this time around to just hear their remarks and hear from them. But yeah, the student aspect is definitely quite a special one. Well, yeah. I know you have a couple remarks for us, so I'm going to disappear from the screen and welcome back to Journalism Under Fire. And we're looking forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you so much. So thanks again, Sandy, for inviting me to be with you here today. And thank you to Sandy and to the Santa Fe Council on International Affairs for putting this event together. As Sandy said, I had the pleasure of attending the first conference, which was in person in 2018. And I will tell you that the energy that was in the air at that time was palpable. They had invited journalists from all over the United States, students, academics, and lots of other, a range of interested observers from all walks of life. They engaged in a really lively discussion on the importance of responsible media coverage. And although the conference was forced to go all digital or all virtual this year, it really is no less relevant than it was that very first year. Sandy and the Santa Fe Council, the team, have lined up an A-list of speakers that have been going on now throughout the conference to discuss this very important topic that we're living right now of covering crisis. And among that A-list are Professor Schiffrin and the African panelists who will speak in just a moment. Our three colleagues from Africa participated in the State Department's International Visitor Leadership Program over the past few years. And Sandy just told you a little bit about the IVLP, or International Visitor Leadership Program. The African journalists that you'll hear from came over several years looking at the practice of journalism in the United States. So I want to tell you a little bit about the International Visitor Leadership Program, and I'll start calling it the IVLP for short. It really is the premier professional exchange program that is run by the US Department of State. It advances our foreign policy goals on a whole range of issues by bringing people together from around the world so that they can talk, discuss, collaborate together with Americans and with one another on important issues. Just like this Journalism Under Fire conference, we have been forced to go all virtual since March, and we're really looking forward to when we can resume bringing people to the United States once again. In a typical year, though, when coronavirus isn't around, the IVLP brings over 5,000 leaders to the United States. And when I say leaders, I don't mean, political leaders like prime ministers. I mean, these are mid-career and emerging professionals. They are leaders in their fields. We bring about 5,000 to the United States every year, joining a group of over 225,000 alumni that we've had in, as Sandy mentioned, our 80-year history. In fact, this December marks our 80th year anniversary, and we're all really excited about it. We've been commemorating all year. While in the United States, international visitors exchange ideas and best practices on a myriad of topics, whether it's educating the world's youth or empowering women in economic and political spheres, or enhancing global security cooperation. And of course, as we're here to talk about today, we do a lot of projects to promote a fair, a free, and a responsible media. We work in partnership with over 80 private sector local organizations that are in communities across the United States, because we want participants to get a private sector perspective and not just whatever the US government might want people to hear. This really is a public-private collaboration. The Santa Fe Council is one of those organizations that we collaborate with regularly. Through these efforts, international visitors from a variety of professional fields can experience the United States, cultivate lasting relationships with the people that they meet on their program. The IVLP is really a mutually beneficial program, and I say that very earnestly, because Americans learn from international visitors just as much as international visitors learn from Americans. We know that we don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. And so we learn from one another to make the world a better place. I want to just mention the selection process because I want you to understand the gravitas that surrounds it. International visitors are selected by US Embassy staff in recognition of their leadership, both in their professions, and in this case, in the field of journalism, as well as in their communities. These are movers and shakers in their communities and in their countries. And upon returning home after completing their 3 weeks in the United States, we know that these international visitors will continue to do great things to improve conditions in their countries. And we know that improving conditions in their countries also helps to improve conditions around the world. We are one global community. I'm delighted that Sandy has invited alumni of the IVLP to join us today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from them. It's been years since they were on the program in the United States. Looking forward to hearing from them and looking forward to hearing as well from Professor Schiffrin. Sandy, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I certainly can't underemphasize that quality of empathy and how we are all one human community, and the more we get to know each other and understand the differences and the similarities across cultures, I just think the richer we all get. And if we're looking at ways in which we might heal this world of ours, I can't think of a better place to start than to be in direct and routine and rich contact with folks from all over the world. So thank you for that, Sana. We will play a little short video about IVLP at the end of the program. But first, we've got lots of conversation to come. So let me say hello to today's moderator, Anya Schiffrin. Hello, Anya.
Hello, Sandy. Good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for joining us. Anya, of course, is the Director of Technology, Media, and Communications at Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. She's a lecturer who teaches on global media, innovation, and human rights, and writes on journalism and development, investigative reporting in the global South, or the majority world, as we heard last night, and has published extensively over the last decade on the media in Africa. So Anya, you're in New York City right now.
Yes, I am.
How is
wearing a mask, and people are really being very, very careful. And at Columbia, a lot of us are teaching online, which is what I've been doing.
And how has the transition to online teaching been for you?
So I have two things. I think it's gone much better than expected. We all spent the summer practicing and learning the ropes of Zoom. So I think the classes have been good. But I think, my husband was saying yesterday, what we've learned is that nobody wants online education. It's not, it's not acceptable. So we're really eager to be back in the same room as our students. And I've been holding outdoor office hours on campus. So I go for several hours every week and students sign up for half-hour slots. And we wear masks, of course, but at least we get to see each other. It's been extremely cold, but it's been so good to see everyone in person. Yeah. So, and then I was really touched by everything you were saying about the State Department support for journalism and exchanges. For 5 years, I hosted with someone called Jane Fulp a conference every year called Covering Globalization, where we actually did workshops on how to cover economics and finance. And we did that at Columbia Journalism School, and the State Department sent us journalists every year from around the world. And it was absolutely terrific. And so many countries I go to, it's the local US Embassy, which is doing programming and bringing journalists together and to meet visiting journalists. So I really want to salute all of those efforts. We're actually having Rick Stengel speak at my class next week about disinformation. So really thanks, Sana, for all of that. I'm so impressed by what you've been doing together with Sandy all these years in the council.
Well, thank you so much. And Anya, let me encourage all the panelists to click on their video now, and we can dive into this conversation. And thank you so much for doing it, and looking forward to a great conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. So I have several questions for the panelists, and then I'll be reading questions from the chat, or the Q&A. So if folks in the audience could please put their questions in there, I'll make sure we get to them. It's really good to see all of you. Some people like Ntibinyane I've been working very closely with, so we've been just emailing each other constantly over these last few months, and we've spoken at each other's classes. And it's wonderful to see Mike again and Mercy as well. Usually we run into each other at conferences in Johannesburg every year, or when I come to Nairobi. So, hopefully we'll all be in person together really soon. I think, as I mentioned, I was very moved by the discussion of the leadership, visitors program. And I was wondering if maybe to start, you could, one of you or all of you could tell me something concrete that you brought back and that changed the way you commit journalism in your own countries.
Okay, maybe let me start here. Thank you so much, Anya, for the question. Now, in 2017, I embarked on the IVLP program to the United States, and it was my first time in the United States, and it was an eye-opening experience, a life-changing experience for me. And I remember vividly two encounters I had. One of the one that gave me an idea of something independent and something new was my experience in Boston. They took us to this BNN. I think it's called BNN TV, Boston Neighborhood Network, and it's a public broadcaster. And I've heard of public broadcasting before, but I didn't really know how it worked. So when they took us through the philosophy of public broadcasting, different from the one owned by the government stations or the government authorities, or the one owned by private organizations, I began to see that, okay, there's a lot that can go on independently, from all of the things that go on. And it was really an amazing thing. So from there, something stuck to me, and I think I can take this back to Nigeria to start thinking of something I can do independently. Then when I got to Los Angeles, that was when things took a better shape for me, because I was still thinking, what would it look like, and all of that. So we visited this Full Disclosure Network. One of their slogans is "the news behind the news," and when we got there, it was another experience altogether. So it was then I concluded on what I would like to take back to Nigeria. It gave me an idea of the independence from government, independence from state, independence from politicians, and something can really work in that regard for the community, for the people, just for the sake of the people, and the people, giving them voices, giving them the power actually, and giving them the light, giving them the way, giving them the path towards thinking in a direction that they can own their future, they can be, positive change, they can contribute greatly to the vision that we have. So these two experiences I can't forget. They're still very fresh in my memory, in Boston and then in Los Angeles. So every day I live, with that. It is part of the things that flash in my mind. So when I got back to Nigeria, it helped me shape the agency that I came up with. And that was what inspired the Rewired Africa Media Network that I came up with. And so we're basically into civic education. And it was basically all thanks and credit to my visitation to Boston and my visitation to Los Angeles, full disclosure.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for that, Mike. Super interesting. I actually want to learn more about this network. Somebody has very helpfully reminded us in the Q&A that we need a very short introduction from each of you. So perhaps you could start by just telling us each where you're working now. And Mike, you can do that on your next comment. Thank you, Ntibinyane. I think you're going next.
Okay. Well, first, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Ntibinyane Ntibinyane, or you can just call me Alvin. I'm a journalist from Botswana, currently in Canada, doing some teaching here for this semester. Yeah, basically what I do is investigative journalism. I'm so much interested in watchdog journalism and all that. Yeah. So back to the IVLP program. Well, in March 2015, when I went to the US, my colleague and I we're in the process of registering a non-profit, non-partisan investigative journalism, network or organization. So my interest going to the US was well defined. I wanted to learn more about non-profit investigative journalism. I wanted to learn more about investigative journalism and the tools of investigative journalism. So when in the US, we visited offices of International Consortium of Investigative Journalists in Washington, DC. The organization then was still under the Center for Public Integrity. So when we got there, I got to learn more about nonprofit news organizations in Africa, in fact, in the US, and how they are run and what it takes to run such an organization from editorial side and also from the operational side. So I met one guy there called Will Fitzgibbon. Since then, we have become, I don't know what I can say. We have become colleagues, we've become collaborators, we've become friends, and we've become brothers. So he introduced me to so many things, investigative tools, funders, and other things. So, so since my visit to Washington, D.C., and also my, collaborations with ICIJ, I have worked on major, ICIJ projects since 2015, on Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, Mauritius Leaks, Vincent Papers of recent. Yeah, so basically what I got there was how to run a nonprofit organization. And when I got home, our center was up and running, and it's still up and running even now. Yeah, thanks.
Amazing. So I guess let me go next. My name is Kandie-Tanui. I'm a broadcast journalist with BBC Africa. We cover the continent. I was at the Edward R. Murrow Program for Journalists in 2013. That's almost 7 years down the line. And you can imagine what a great impact the program had in my life 7 years down the line. 2013, then, what I carried from that program, that one thing that 2013, 14, 15, up to now, I keep on remembering, is when we visited New York and there was the collapse of the Staten Island newspapers. And I remember very well back at home, and by home I mean Nairobi, our newspapers were not doing so well, but it hadn't collapsed. But that was back then in 2013. And I remember having the conversation with the journalists there and how people had to readjust. What we are seeing right now, no more going to the offices. I mean, COVID has made all this happen right now, but the adjustments of the newsrooms and how the newspaper companies were shifting to publishing and readjusting, the importance of readjusting a business to sustain journalists as well. And I remember coming back and talking to our director. Then I left my employer, but I remember coming back and sitting down with the director of innovation. And I mean, we had to put up strategies and, come up with ideas on what next. And I'm glad that a few months and a few years down the line, the digital team was started. And yeah, I mean, it was great impact. Imagine that was 2013. And now just seeing that happen, I'm looking at Mike and Alvin talking with so much passion. And you can imagine what 7 years down the line will be able to, much that will be done from the impact that you got from the program. Yeah.
I think in the studies that we've done about media startups and nonprofit media around the world, one thing we found is that visits like these, visits to other media outlets, as well as conferences, turn out to become a huge source of inspiration. That cross-fertilization really has enormous impacts. And I'm glad, Mercy, that you also mentioned COVID, because my next question is, how is COVID changing African journalism? Ntibinyane wrote a very sort of alarming paper earlier this year about how outlets are likely to die and the importance. I know that Ntibinyane and also Eric, I think Mwanga in Kenya is trying to raise funds now for digital transition. So I'd just love to hear about how COVID's affected you. I think globally, there's a huge demand for quality information at this point, but the revenue isn't following demand. What does this picture look like in where you're all working?
Yeah, you've mentioned two things, quality and content, how it has affected all that. So first of all, what happened is that the first thing when there was government put stringent measures, lockdowns, and businesses were shut down. Media, the media organization itself, media companies were affected. I know, well, at least we are lucky where I work currently, nobody got a pay cut, but I empathize with my colleagues. I know one particular media house had to shut down completely. About 300 people lost their jobs. I know people who've had to take pay cuts up to now, 20 to 30% pay cut, 50% pay cut. So imagine what impact that has had to be. So when lockdown happened and Kenya reported the first case, what that meant is that very few people were going to the offices going to the field. Remember, Anya, for a journalist, you go for training, the HEFA training, when you want to report on war-torn areas, and you get training for that. But with the pandemic, nobody's immune. You don't get training to report a pandemic, I wish there were vaccines for journalists so that we can go out there and give stories. But there are no vaccines for journalists to, like how you get HEFA training, then you go to, a war-torn area to report. So I remember the first instance, we were at home, we just had to generate content from the home. So what that did two things. First of all, people had to be innovative. So the importance of user-generated content. We decided to go big on Facebook. We now have a discussion on the BBC Africa Facebook page where we discuss topics and myths, the myths around the Madagascar cure. And I don't know about Nigeria and Botswana, but WhatsApp and Facebook is really big. My folks would send me news. Hey, you better hold your breath for 10 minutes. That will cure COVID and you'll know you don't have it. And then in essence, we counteracted that and had Facebook Live discussions where we had experts recording selfie videos of facts and myths around COVID-19. And you see, then we realized that, hey, we can actually do really good content around Facebook and around what people are now accessing in terms of information. But therein also was a challenge, the quality of the stories that are being told. Remember, Anya, journalism is about getting out. There's a joke about being an armchair journalist, that you just sit there and you do your stories. But the true journalism is going out to the field and doing the stories. But again, the lockdown. So I have to call an expert in Ghana and tell him or her, oh, are you able to record for us a video? So your contributor becomes a journalist. And the conversations back and forth. Oh, Professor so-and-so, are you able to sit where you can get good lighting? So that's lighting, first of all. Content, scientists do not break down content as a journalist would. They tell you a lot of, the byproduct of a lot of scientific content and, that back and forth. So we had to adjust on how to train our contributors to be journalists first and then contributors second, so that it can ease, the relay of information. My points are a bit interrelated, but I'd like to also say that the pandemic just added fuel to the fire. In terms of traditional media was not doing as well. One of my former bosses used to say, TV survived. Newspaper is collapsing because people are going mobile, although not many people access internet. But TV, there's some reasoning that TV survived because stories are well told, and that made TV, thrive more and more. So yeah, but the pandemic just made us all realize that, hey, this is what it is. We need to be creative. We need to be innovative. We have more than one program on our Facebook Lives. In fact, just yesterday, we launched another program on Facebook Live. Our numbers are still going high in terms of the COVID infections. The lockdowns are still being implemented. But yeah, I remember that particular, when I told you about nobody's immune to COVID-19, even as journalists, when we thought, you know, there's a thing about being a journalist. You think you're immune to sometimes even gunfire. And I don't know, you go into the story head on, you know, you go and tell the story as it is. But I remember, in fact, when we had our first confirmed case in our office, there was panic. And you know what panic does to your mental health and how the clarity that you have to do, and you're working at home. And so panic in itself in your head and what you do affects, again, the quality of stories and how you tell your stories. Anya, I don't know if you're a working mother, but as a journalist, working from home, being a mother, having 2 toddlers running around, you're in a Zoom meeting, you're talking to your contributor who you've tried to get the whole day. But yeah, you can imagine the dynamics. I'm just trying to paint an entire picture of an impact that is impacting a company and an individual in terms of remuneration, but also when you're working from the home and the kind of impact it has to you as an individual, and now what impact it has on how you tell your stories.
I think that there's so many people who've had a hard time during the pandemic, but I think no question that people with small children that are juggling work and kids. There was a time earlier this year where every Friday, one of my friends with kids would call me basically to cry, you know, because it was so hard and it went on for so long. So mercy, absolutely. Women are often carrying double burden. And you've also made a point, you know, we're avid news junkies in our house, but even after a few weeks in, my husband said, oh, the stories are all the same because the journalists can't go out anymore. And it's very hard, right? As you're saying, to keep producing really interesting reporting when you're stuck at home. I definitely also want to talk about disinformation, but I want to give Alvin and Mike a chance to talk a little bit about the effects they've seen from COVID. And I put Alvin's excellent GIJN blog post about African media in the group chat so everybody can see it in the audience. And we definitely have time for questions. So don't forget to put questions in to the people in the audience. But anyway, Mike, Alvin, did you want to come in here on any of this?
Yeah, let me add something else. Anyway, let me use the time to also formally introduce myself. Like you said earlier on, I attended the IVLP in 2017, and I am a senior anchor with TVC, and I am head of newscasters here and all presenters in TVC. I am an associate lecturer at the Nigeria Institute of Journalism here in Lagos, Nigeria, and I am the founder of Rewired Africa Media Network, and courtesy of my visitation to the United States. All right, now the impact of COVID-19 on journalism has been huge. We've had the negative side. We've also had the positive sides, and we're just taking it, you know, side. Mercy has said a lot of things, and in fact, this sub-Saharan Africa is almost the same. What goes on in Kenya is almost the same thing that happens in Botswana, is the same thing that happens in Rwanda, and then in Nigeria, and then in Ghana, you know, and so on. We have very similar experiences. Now, one thing there is, we've seen, apart from, in addition to what Mercy has said, we've also seen an infiltration of people who originally have nothing to do with journalism going into the journalism profession. Now, social media has given people power, you know, power to, you know, you can record anything going on right now, post it right now, and then the news goes viral, and then you're getting credits and you're getting likes and you're getting retweets, as the case may be, or you're getting, you know, so it gives this inspiration to continue like that. But certainly that is not the way journalism actually is, because the point there is, apart from telling the story the way it's supposed to be told, there are some level of filters, because you're going to be sensitive to your audience, because you're serving different audiences. You're going to be very sensitive to who is where and what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, based on balancing what the rules are, what the regulations are, what is acceptable and what is the norm, you know, and all of that. So we've had quacks, you know, in the profession, where we have information coming fast. Some people just sit down in their own sitting room or in their living rooms, type anything based on the way they feel, and then they post it out there. When COVID-19 started in Nigeria, within early April and then sometime in May, you know, there were stories going viral that COVID-19 is, in fact, Africans are immune to COVID-19, that the African gene is very immune to COVID-19. And then there were also stories that if you take ginger, and mix it up with some, some other concoctions and all of that, it can prevent you from having COVID-19. We also had stories of the temperature, the tropical temperature of Africa, inoculating Africans from COVID-19. But we saw that a lot of people went down. In fact, our colleagues, our friends, relatives, neighbors, church members went down, dying of COVID-19. So that wasn't true. So eventually, we, like Mercy said, we had to come up with programs like Myths and Facts about COVID-19, trying to ensure that we enlighten the public when it comes to what the facts are, not about the sensation of what people feel, what they're hearing. And in fact, there was also the stories that went around that COVID-19 was a rich man or the sickness of the elite, that it has nothing to do with people who are, down there and all of that. And we had to use our programs, churning out episodes daily to enlighten people that is not true. COVID-19 affects every single person. So based on that, in the nutshell, because we've had a lot of people who are not trained journalists, it has put pressure on the professional journalists, because now we have more misinformation, going out there. We have more disinformation. We have more fake news going out there. So so journalists now have a greater task of trying to ensure that they still feed the people with what the facts are, what the truth is, and all of that. So that is the kind of pressure that journalism has been under. But however, if you flip the coin to the positive side, of course, the point there is, here we are talking online. Originally, we all may have been in New Mexico holding this conference, but here we are talking perfectly, and we're attending this conference, this international conference, seamlessly, which is amazing. So a lot of people have now known that the concept of working from home or working from anywhere is doable. And in fact, the new norm, or the new normal, like they say, has come to stay. That you don't have to be present in the office. You don't have to be present on the field to get some of your real facts. Now, recently, there was a story of NSAS. Maybe some of you are familiar with the NSAS protest in Nigeria. That stories went viral where some youths were killed and all of that. Now, some of the videos that are being used at the panel of inquiry were not videos by any conventional media. Most of the videos are videos from social media, people recording what's going on live, and they stand as evidence. So it takes you to the point of originally where the military or the government would have gotten away with a lot of things and said, no, we didn't do this. In fact, because there were so many conflicting stories. Initially, the government of Lagos State conflicted with the government of the federal government of Nigeria, and that conflicted with the Minister of Information, and also conflicted with the soldiers. They were saying different things about the same event, with the same incident or the same situation. So when the videos came out and they saw that, okay, these videos, you cannot dispute these videos, the military now came back to the table and said, okay, we actually, we own up to the fact that we used some live ammunition or live bullets alongside some, and all of that. Originally, they would have stood by their initial position of saying, in fact, we were not there at Lekki toll gate where the shooting happened. So the point there is, it is bringing light to Nigerians, giving power to the ordinary citizen by holding government accountable and all of that. So these are some of the positives that COVID-19 has brought to not just Nigerians, but an average person out there on the streets.
I think we're all finding that the connections between us and the chance to see people from all over the world has been a real plus silver lining of this terrible time. I'm also so interested in what both of you were saying about misinformation, disinformation, because over the summer I spent some time writing with Peter Cunliffe-Jones, who helped found Africa Check, and he's been working with a bunch of African colleagues to look at how mis and disinformation is spreading on the continent. And of course, like in the US, a lot of it is coming from government officials who are spreading disinformation about COVID and about medical matters. And this is a real problem. I think that Africa Check has actually been working with the Nigerian Ministry of Health. So, again, we all see the importance of quality information from journalists, and you've obviously been doing a lot of this yourselves as, part of your public service function and giving people accurate information on health. Apart from that, or including that, Alvin, what are you seeing as a result of, did you get a good response to your piece about what the effect that COVID could have on African media?
Oh yes, Anya. But I think to answer your question, your earlier question, I think it's important to put things into proper, context and perspective, and go back to Africa or the world before COVID-19, and go back to the 2007-2008 global economic crisis. I always like to go back there. Because then most newspapers were expected to die, close down, lay off employees during and after the crisis. But for certain reason, most newspapers in Africa survived. They emerged from that crisis, just okay. The demand for news in print remained sort of shaky, but quite stable. The advertising business model appeared to be working, at least in some cases. And then, but now the thing is, the past 5 years, it has been terrible for the industry. The revenues from the two sources, advertising and circulation, they've been steadily declining in years due to the uptake of digital news. But to remain in business, like in the past 5 years, news organizations in Africa, including in my home country of Botswana, have been going through restructuring exercises and also like minor retrenchment or layoffs. But all in all, the past 5 years, newspapers in other ways were in what I always call financial ventilators. They were bleeding money, they were bleeding readers, they were bleeding influence. But now, as somebody was saying, the pandemic has added fuel to that. It's expediting the total collapse of the newspaper model. And I think we are no longer talking about newspapers as in ICU or as trying to survive. We are talking about the possibility of extinction of some newspapers or some newspapers as we know them. But if that was to happen, that would be tragic. So now with the newspaper crisis, what does this mean now to investigative journalism or accountability journalism or watchdog journalism, which is my biggest interest? The answer is clear. Without newspapers, which I think are the custodian of watchdog journalism, and that's it better than radio and TV in some cases, in some regions. Surely we can see even now that watchdog journalism is is diminishing. So, like I was saying, newspapers' immune system as a whole, it's weak, and it's even weaker during the COVID-19 or during the pandemic outbreak. Newspapers with their underlying financial problems, they are in a very serious condition. In my home country of Botswana, newspapers are struggling, to survive completely. They have cut salaries. Some are even seriously thinking of closing shop. Others have closed bureaus and satellite offices. In South Africa, it's even worse. So you have seen it. You have a situation where around 3 or 4 big magazine companies have closed shop completely. In Zimbabwe, I was speaking to a reporter a few hours ago. He was telling me that he hasn't been paid for 4 months. In Uganda, 4 community news organizations have closed completely. they were published in local language. They have closed completely. In other countries also, I can think of Swaziland. Journalists have been forced to take, pay cards, and they're paid as per the story, as per the the stories they produce. So the whole thing has been quite terrible for the industry as a whole. But I think we should also be talking about is what should be done. Yeah.
It's actually interesting that, Alvin, you bring the point about the newspapers, and it has made me think about, you see, what is now being called the new media, the digital world. There's, I think even Mike mentioned it. You see, in that space, before, I think because initially the traditional media was trusted more. And I remember the conversation where a story would break in the morning, and you would spend an entire day verifying your facts. I mean, we have a policy at the BBC where we say we are not the first to break the news. It's not about being, out there, the first one, but when we break it, we tell you the truth after an entire process of verifying, calling your sources and all that. But you see, with the digital space, before traditional media, well, most media houses, say in Kenya, before they stepped up on that platform, there were already social media influencers who were ruling that space. And you see, for example, in Kenya, the top 3 media stations is, there's one called Citizen TV, Nation, and KTN News. So that's traditional media. But when you go to the digital platform, the social media influencers have even more followers than the TV traditional media. So then they are the market leaders in that space. So when they share in whatever information or whatever breaking news there is about, say, the control, I remember a particular story, even with COVID related, the hydroxychloroquine, and the viral video about people taking that particular drug. And I know my friends who, I mean, these are people who are, they are, they have access to sites that can give them good information, but many people chose to trust what content that was given out by social media influencers. So therein brings a different sphere. How then do you, online is tricky, online is funny. People like funny things, not too serious things, and they tend to follow that. If Alvin and Mike will bear with me witness, there was, in fact, when the numbers were really low in Africa, there was a trending song, do you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who has COVID? And it was an entire joke. And you see, when a reputable media house will not share that, but that particular, is it a meme or whatever that could trend video and goes viral, then people believe, we are immune, we are all that. And you struggle streaming to 10,000 people. Your competitor, who's not a journalist, is streaming to 2 million people with facts that are not verified. So I hear you, Alvin, about, I mean, by the time a story is going to print, that's verified. It has gone through several editors. A social media influencer, he knows he'll get clicks and likes. So therein is a challenge, even with the space, that there's a balance between attracting people to your channel so that you're able to be a market leader in a space that's growing as well.
And I have thank you for that, Mercy. And I have a follow-up question for Alvin, which is, given how many people in Africa aren't on the internet, how do you see, so, what would digitizing do for those people? And then, would they lose access to information? And then also, I'm interested to hear from all of you, what about the younger generation? How are they getting their information? And how do you sort of market to them? And what does digital transition mean for the younger generation? And then I'll take a couple questions from the chat. Thank you.
I think 10 years ago, 2010, internet penetration in Africa was around 40%. And 10 years later, it's around 60%. So which is an indicator that more people are now embracing internet, whether in their homes or using their using their cell phones and all that. If you look at Kenya, for example, I think Mercy will correct me. the internet penetration there, the latest figures show it's more than 80%. Yeah. So what I think should be done now is that, well, I think one can ask the question about what will happen now to the rest. If internet penetration in Africa is 60%, what about the 60? What about the 40%? If we are going to
access is different.
Yeah.
Penetration and access, two things. It could be there, but getting it and streaming information. Yeah.
No. True. I agree completely. But the question is, what happens to those who are unable to access internet? And the answer is, we still need newspapers. We still need radio, and something should be done to ensure that there's a transition. There's a transition between newspapers and in the digital world. And I think it starts with trying to find a solution. And I think finding a solution starts with also asking ourselves a question: what is journalism? Is it a public good or not? If it's a public good, I think we have to have as many stakeholders as possible trying to find a solution to this, including the government. I know some people say we should not include the government on matters of journalism or trying to save journalism or newspapers. But I think we have to seriously talk about the role of the government in trying to find solutions to problems affecting journalism and newspapers and watchdog journalism as a whole.
All right, if I have to add to that as well, the point is, the trends have really changed, and the trends they keep changing as the days roll by. And traditional media, if they have to continue the way they have always been, then certainly they will miss it, because the young generation, they have their characteristics, they have their own character, they have their build-up, they have their, it's just like bringing people from space, to meet Earth. And you need to do things the way that you can reach out to them. For instance, it seems like the new generation, millennials, for instance, they live in a space somewhere. They don't live in our world. They don't live in our world at all. So, for instance, as simple as the way we were brought up, values and all of that, the way our mothers and fathers will approach us, teaching us things, you want to teach a millennial the same way, of course, you will miss it, because their attention span, what is value to him or her, is totally different. What is driving and inspiring him or her is totally different. So it's the same thing in journalism. Traditional media, like for instance, Mercy and Alvin have said this before. When the print was on and then radio was coming up, everyone thought that print was going to go extinct. But here we still have print, and the radio is still on. When TV came eventually, everyone said that's the end of radio. But here we are, we still have all of those. Now social media is here, and whether it has impact on the traditional media is totally a different topic altogether. But certainly the point there is that we're still going to have print. Whether the impact is reduced or not, we're still going to have print, we're still going to have radio, we're still going to have TV, and then now it's just an addition we're having. But the issue there is the strategies have to change, because the traditional way of broadcasting is evolving. Now, social media, the use of social media or multimedia, if I have to put it that way, by deliberately using those strategies by traditional media is very key. Because if you're going to get the numbers, you're going to get to the audience, you need to be able to meet them where they are. Use things the way they want it, ensure that they give them their consumables the way they want it. For instance, if you're going to, like FM stations now, many of the FM stations in Lagos, for instance, or in Nigeria, they don't run news the way we used to sit down for 15 minutes or 20 minutes listening to news. Nobody is going to stay for that long listening to any news broadcast on radio stations, or except for TV and all of that. You need to be able to break them into snippets. That's why we have 1 minute news now, giving you headlines of so many of the stories. And then if you want to get details, you can go there and then you can read details. But the millennials don't have, their attention span is so short. And what is even of interest to them, they want entertainment, they want something. In fact, they want to remain in a comfort zone where they are not involved with anything that stretches them, anything that puts them under pressure, except that thing is bringing in money. So the point there is that the traditional media has to come up with new strategies of trying to reach these people the way they want it, how they want it, and how they want these consumables consumed. And we need to take advantage of social media and even multimedia so that one story can be broken or baked in different dimensions for these people to consume.
Yeah, I think a disruption was happening in the industry where now COVID is disrupting the disruption. And I like what you say, Alvin, that, I mean, if you see, even like what we currently do, we do content where we call it near news. Because as you say, if you want to reach to the youth, then you deliver it in a way that they need to consume. Because believe it or not, they're absorbing information, and the advent of fake news is just on another level. So yeah, you have to reach them at a particular level. And they are the highest population in our continent. And they are craving for information. They are craving for information, yeah.
Mercy, your points are so well taken. I've been teaching on mis and disinformation and policy solutions. And I noticed when I started a few years ago, my students didn't know what I was talking about. And they just thought, oh, it's only dumb old people that forward, these crazy things. Yeah. What are you so worried about? And now my students tell me, I don't know what to read. I don't understand, I don't know what's true. They don't know basic journalism principles. Surprised when I explain what you're talking about, that you have to go out and do reporting, that you can't take, people. So there's a lot to teach, I think, as well. And of course, to learn from.
I also want to
sorry, I was just going to say, I have to go to my next panel in a minute, but I wanted to put some questions out there. And Alvin, if you want to ignore them, you can. But we have two questions about rural areas and how they're getting information about COVID. People are asking, is the radio helping to put out information from doctors? What happens in rural areas now that journalists can't travel? So it would be great to hear that. And then Sandy will take over when I go to my Columbia Zoom. But the other questions about opinion journalism and what effect that has had on Africa. So I'll stick around to hear your answers before I go to my next event. Thank you so much.
I don't know, maybe I should talk about the one on radio.
Go for it, Alan.
Yeah, I still think that radio is quite effective even now. Newspapers are going through a rough time, but I think radio, still reaches out to as many as people as possible. So I think there is an opportunity for radio, and I think the government, where I come from, I think the government, and also health officials are using radio to communicate, messages to the rural areas, and I think it's working quite well. And I know for sure also, like in Namibia, it's still the same thing. So radio remains quite vibrant in Africa.
Yeah, to add to that, here in Nigeria, we still have places where you don't have internet penetration or internet connections even until today. So we have people who reside within rural areas and who have interest and passion for journalism, and they help in disseminating information here and there. But the point there is, we still have places, for instance, in central Nigeria, like in Benue State, for instance, there's a local government there that they still have this local gong, you're going to disseminate information like, okay, the king says, okay, listen, everyone, the king has said, blah, 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 blah. You still have things like that, So information is given to people like that, from what I understand and what I read, where they still go, using the gong to send messages to people, informing people what is going on. How effective that is totally a different thing. But it tells you the challenges that are inherent in the society where there's a multidimensional challenges that we have There are areas where there is internet. There are areas where there are no internet. There are areas where radio, community radio even covers, you know, some of the areas and disseminating information to people. Whether everyone has enough to listen or has the time to listen or has what it takes to listen is totally a different thing. But I think I agree with Alvin. Radio has the largest audience when it comes to all the different media altogether, except now that social media is huge where it is. But if you compare the numbers, for instance, like in Lagos, radio still remains huge because there is a phenomenon of traffic. There's a traffic jam. In fact, if you come to Lagos and you've not experienced traffic, please go back and say you didn't come to Lagos. That is how bad it is. So traffic is one very major thing that will welcome you to Lagos. And on all the cars, the millions of cars on the roads in Lagos, they have stereos and all of them are tuned to one station or the other, one radio station or the other, whether it is a public transport, a public, commercial transport or private cars, as the case may be. So you see people, even those who don't have the conscious, who don't have the willing to listen to radio, but because you are in traffic, you're frustrated, you can't go anywhere else, you're forced to listen to radio. And one way or the other, you listen 1 to 3 minutes, and then you have no choice but to follow the program to the end, or follow the news or whatever they're playing to the end. So radio is still very huge when it comes to the numbers of people who listen to whatever it is, it's radio or media and all of that in that sense.
Yeah, I think one more thing again is that the downside of radio again is that in most countries, even in Africa, radio is still under the control of the government, you know, and it can also be used as a propaganda tool, and they have done that. They're using radio to spread their own, you know, propaganda message and all that, you know. So it can be a downside, you know, it can be, you know, a disadvantage to many people. The other thing that I think I just wanted to add is that during this COVID-19 pandemic, one thing that I've realized is that social media in Africa is full of disinformation, and the big techs, Twitter, Facebook, are doing little to address this problem. They are more focused on what's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe. And here you can, you know, you have lots of, you know, disinformation campaigns going on for like a month, 2 months, and they're not even flagging them. They're not even doing anything. And I think this is an area where I think they can do better.
And I think, Alvin, as you say, the disinformation, and there's a lot of also mistrust, first from government, even if it's government on radio, although the top leading radio stations in Kenya are privately owned, but the top advertisers are government. So again, therein goes the hand that feeds you. But the mistrust that the community has, especially with even COVID and the corruption around, say, funding around it. I mean, some of it is true, some of it not true, but being able to, you know, wanting to be at the top of, I mean, the media, giving you the information, the facts as it is, already the community, unless they experience it, that's when they begin to trust the media. It's a funny scenario, especially with COVID, and especially when initially in March and April and even May, up until recently, when the numbers were high in America and in Italy and Spain, and that was not being seen in Africa, worsened by the theories that Africans would drop like flies and all that information. Then that did not happen. Although right now, I mean, our hospitals are full and all that, but there's a funny scenario where people have to experience it to believe you, even as the media. So therein even if information reaches the grassroots, the rural areas, people have to experience it to believe you. They have to see it, because if they don't see it, they think it's influenced by government or by international community.
Well, I'm going to jump to the Q&A and just read this question that Anya was talking about opinion journalism. Before I do so, I couldn't help but see Mercy smile when you were talking about traffic in Lagos, because the traffic in Nairobi is truly world-class. But anyway, this is a really good question, and I think we'll just go around for each of your reactions. And Mercy, I think we'll start with you, and I'll just ask the question because it's a good one from Paul Blumhardt. And he writes, in the United States, opinion journalism like Fox News commentary shows or conservative talk radio have developed enormous audiences. And it's true.
Please come up again. Please come up again. You froze for a second.
Okay. In the United States, opinion journalism like Fox News commentary shows or conservative talk radio have developed enormous audiences. Donald Trump has taken advantage of this phenomenon and provided the kind of political theater and conspiracies that have been extensively covered. How much has this type of populist, exaggerated, seductive journalism succeeded in your country? And how do you think it will evolve in the future? So Mercy, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Mike and then Alvin.
I think, have you ever heard of the phrase that the more things change, the more they remain the same? Like, I think it's just a similar scenario. However, it's you know, with opinion journalism, again, I can tell you, I mean, you've been to Nairobi and you know our politics, and it's highly, you either an opinion that you give, first people will, you know, see who is first saying what they're saying, why they're saying what they're saying. And I think for me, Sandy, I'm just trying to really figure out. I think it's the same thing, Sandy, that it matters who is saying it and who. I'm really trying to not be politically wrong or right, but yeah, I think it matters. Yeah.
It's a big one.
I've hung there. Yeah.
Mike,
Hello?
let me throw the same question to you. I know there's a lot of opinion in Lagos.
I can feel what Mercy is
I
not
don't
saying.
want to be
Because
politically.
it's quite huge. It's quite huge. No, I
Mm.
feel you actually, because we feel the same thing in Nigeria. Now the point there is, a lot of our politics here, the moment the president, whoever the president is going to be, people judge him from where he comes from, what ethnic group he belongs, what tribe, what religion, and all of that. So all the different political parties try to balance this. You know, if the presidential candidate is coming from is a Muslim, then the vice has to be a Christian, or the other way around. If the president is coming from the south, then the vice has to come from the north. You know, as a way of balancing and all of that. But if we take it down now to the issue of journalism, opinion journalism in sub-Saharan Africa, to a great extent, we are not there yet, because the freedom by which, right now in the last US election, where we saw Fox News on one hand and then CNN on the other hand, and it looks like there was a war of opinions, you know, and a sitting broadcaster or sitting presenter or newscaster can make a statement of, and you know where he belongs or know where his leaning is. In Nigeria, that will earn you a fine. In fact, the station is going to be fined seriously, because upon that is, that can sway a lot of people. Now, in the US, we can understand, because the First Amendment in the Constitution of the United States has taken care of a lot of things. And the philosophy and the ideology of any young person coming up in the United States, that freedom to say, freedom to do, freedom to voice, freedom to reason, all of those things are not necessarily, they've not really been on ground in the African countries. In fact, up until now, like Alvin was saying, many radio TV stations are still 100% owned by government in many countries, where you might find only one or none that is privately owned in some of the African countries. Now, in Nigeria, where I am rather, the point there is, the National Broadcasting Commission, the NBC, is the regulatory body for all broadcast stations. And the codes that every broadcaster has to abide by is that you cannot say anything that is your opinion. Now, The Freedom of Information Act has just been passed, I think just about 10 years ago, or less than 10 years ago in Nigeria, where people have the freedom to ask questions or say this or say that and all of that. So the point there is, opinion journalism, we're still evolving. We haven't gotten there yet. Now, media, the way we see it, journalism, the way we see it, didn't emanate from the African culture. You know, so African countries and African businessmen or African journalists to a great extent will have to play the catch up, because when it comes to the access to what they have, access to what the Western media have or has, the African journalist or journalism has not gotten there yet. Now, for somebody like Mercy, for instance, who is a professional, well-bred, 100% journalist, world-class journalist, as the case may be, the point there is, if you sit Mercy down, as in take him back to her village and say, okay, fine, let us talk. The point there is, Mercy is going to tell you some of the challenges back home when it comes to what she has to do, the extra mile she has to do to get to where she has gotten to. So the point there is, some things are readily available in the United States or in Canada or in the UK or in Europe when it comes to journalism and how it is run, that are not readily available on the African continent. So it impacts the way that journalism is run. So when it comes to the opinion, being a broadcaster and having your opinion, it sways a lot of people, because media literacy is still very low on the African continent. So the point there is the ability of people to decipher, try to sieve or filter what you're saying, deduce meanings out of it, trying to make verifications and all of that. We don't have all of those things yet. So the moment you throw it out, they say, oh, so that is where you belong. And in fact, recently, my station where I work for, TVC, was burnt down totally by hoodlums. The videos went viral across the world. So the point there is, it is still a product of that kind of thing, where people hold a certain kind of notion, feeling that, oh, this media station is thinking in this direction, so they are anti-people. So they tag you the enemy, not seeing things from the perspective of, if this media station is giving you news from this perspective, the other one can give you from another perspective, so you choose which one you want to listen to. So the point there is, these are the challenges on the African continent. So we are not necessarily there yet. So opinion journalism is still trying to take hold gradually, and it's going to take some time for us to have it the way it is in the Western world, or in the United States, or any of the other countries of the world.
Thank you, Mike. Last word to you, Alvin.
Yeah, you see, I'm from a newspaper background, so opinion in the newspaper, it's a big feature, like in journalism, like in print journalism. So we offer our opinion, we write columns, we op-eds and all that. But I think opinion should be based on fact. I think it should be something that is based on fact, and something that is based on the idea that you want to inform, that you want to educate, you want to hold those in power to account. What's happening, the circus that is happening in the US, if I can call it the circus, Mike, I think you are hard on yourself. I think the issue of media literacy in Africa and in the US, we are, I think, in the same level. I'm sorry to say this. We're in the same level. Readers and viewers are gullible. They use emotions to interpret news and all that. But I think again, I also understand where you're coming from, because we know the distraction that can be caused by so-called opinion journalism. You have to go back to Rwanda. What happened? Radio stations, they fueled the genocide. Many people were killed, millions were killed, because some guys thought they could spew hate and disinformation using radio. So I think in Africa at the moment, I give an example of what's happening in South Africa now. They are slowly trying to introduce the MSNBC, the Fox style of journalism. Recently, like 2 weeks ago, they launched a program, a TV program, a 1-hour program by one guy who is well animated, and he's he knows how to talk, and they're saying he's holding power to account, and he's doing that, but he does it in a fashion and in a manner that really stokes emotions. And I think we should be careful of something like that. As much as we want to hold power to account, but we should not try to stoke emotions and try to insult the other side and make them look bad. So I think with the opinion, and I'm for opinion, I think people should express their opinions, but they should do it in a responsible manner, in a responsible fashion. Yeah.
Let me second that.
I think it works for newspaper well, but because even with the newspapers, Mike says people will look at the name of the writer, where does he come from? So, oh yeah, so he's affiliated to the president. Oh, that's why his opinion is that way. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I agree, Alvin, with when you say that it has to be factual and objective, but coming from, I mean, Rwanda is an example, Kenyans were an example. We've come from a dark past with the post-election violence that sometimes even when there was a time even all the media houses were gagged. We had a blackout and we were streaming only on YouTube. So it's a very sensitive, can I say it's grounds that are really, you step on it while you're testing the waters. There's one currently in one of the local station, and it's called a gang, and people air their opinion. But even therein, people will still question, oh, why are they, who's the owner of that media house? Oh, so that's why. And you have to be really sensitive about it, because we are nearing an election. And when you give an opinion, even if it's factual, a certain section of the country then views you as affiliated to a particular side. I remember when I was covering the election in 2013, wearing a color of a political party in your dress code was an outright no-no. That also seemed like you were doing an unverbal opinion. Just by being seen by a yellow or a red dress, you're supporting a presidential candidate. So yeah, a bit tricky and sensitive, yeah.
Yes, the red baseball cap in the United States will never be the same again. I want to thank you all so much for your remarks. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Mercy Kandie-Tanui. Thank you, Mike Okwoche. Thank you, Ntibinyane, Alvin, Ntibinyane. We appreciate you all so much. And we'd love to have you to come to Santa Fe, or just to come back to the United States and share your great wisdom with us. So thanks for taking the time to join us here today.
Thank you so much, Sandy.
Thank you. I had so much fun.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Alvin. Thank you, Mercy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just before everyone goes, I'm going to play a little video, a short little video, 1.5 minutes of the International Visitor Leadership Program. And then I hope to see many of you at our talk at 1 o'clock Mountain today on covering crisis in Indian countries. So here is the video. We, of course, have been a proud partner of this program for 56 years now, and here's to another 56 years. So with that said, we'll see you in a few hours for Covering Crisis in Indian Country. Bye for now.